Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, and this is the show where I give you an all-access pass to the restaurant industry's most influential decision makers. This week, I'm talking with Pike Howard, the co-owner of Felipe's Taqueria, a 6-unit fast casual concept out of New Orleans that has prioritized its systems and its business model in its nearly 20 years in business as it grows slowly across the South. Pike was a finance guy when his father-in-law pulled him into the Felipe's business, and that mindset has really benefited the company as Pike has helped it to develop a strong brand identity, a vision, and an infrastructure, and to resist the urge to grow quickly. The result is a unique and healthy business that really leans into its hospitality and its hybrid service model with a full bar as differentiating factors. Pike joined the podcast to talk about why unit growth has not been as much of a priority as internal growth and how the fast casual category's evolution has made hospitality all the more important to today's consumer. In this interview, you will learn more about why you sometimes need to let guests choose their own adventure in your restaurant, why you have to be honest with your customers when things go bad, and how the data you collect is a relationship building tool. Also, reminder, we are gearing up for an incredible Create event for emerging restaurateurs this October 15th through 17th in Nashville. Our agenda is nearly set in stone, and it features leaders from companies like Cava, Din Tai Fung, Fogo de Chaux, Honeygrow, Swig, and Dutch Bros, not to mention a keynote, chat, and performance from the Bacon Brothers, starring none other than Kevin Bacon himself. Also, if you're an emerging restaurant leader, we have a special session that will allow you to pitch your concept directly to investors, but act now as spots are limited. This event is free to restaurant operators to attend, so go register at create.nrn.com today. Jumping now into my interview with Felipe's Taqueria co-owner Pike Howard. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview as I will share my 6 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Okay, I'm sitting down with Pike Howard, the co-owner of Felipe's Taqueria. Pike, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. So, Pike, I'm really interested to learn more about Felipe's and this great story you guys have now with 6 locations based in New Orleans. And you got a fun origin story to how that all came together. But Pike, I got to know, before Felipe's was in your life, what were you doing? What was life like before you got into restaurants?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was really just a finance-focused guy, right? So I studied economics at the University of Virginia and came out thinking, okay, I need to get to Manhattan and make a go of it. And I did, and it was great. I worked for Merrill Lynch, but oddly enough, my timing wasn't perfect. So I graduated in 2008, which was a tough time for the financial industry. I actually remember being on the trading floor one day where they had to let go of I think it was about 30 different individuals. And I'm shaking hands with people that are senior to me, and they hardly know me. And I was the cheap guy. So I got to stick around and make it through that, only because of who I was and what I cost. But that was a really interesting start, I think, to my career. I think what I took away from that was that, there are good times and there are definitely bad times in all industries. And you sort of have to figure out how to ride those waves and make it work even when it's not working, if that makes sense.
Totally. Absolutely. Okay, so I know that the path to Felipe's was not so simple as you had an idea, you opened a restaurant, and here we are. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different winding story. Tell me that story.
It is. And it's really, to this day, it remains a family-owned business for almost 20 years now, 2 decades, with its origins actually in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right near Harvard. And there's an interesting element to that real estate location versus why we got to New Orleans. But if you come to New Orleans post-Katrina, kind of things are reeling, but there's a lot of opportunity, right? And a gentleman who knew my father-in-law really well wanted to open up a deli next door, and he had told him, hey, can you help me, Rob, build a deli? And this was a laundromat, which is funny because it still kind of has that feel of the location there. It still has that kind of laundromat look. And he said, no, my cousin up in Boston near Harvard has this great concept and he's doing really well. Let's go check it out. And so they go up and they check it out, and they like it. And so they decide with the guy up in Boston, Tom's his name, who's a really solid operator. Let's bring the concept to New Orleans. Let's give it a shot. They have this location that violates all real estate principles in terms of visibility, and they get going. And then in that process, my father-in-law tells the group, "Hey, we can't have a restaurant in New Orleans without a bar, right? Go figure." So that introduces the bar into the concept. I think not at the time even realizing sort of how that would play out over time and creating what would be sort of a hybrid concept model. It's not just, walk up, order, build it and go. We have a bar where you can get full service. And that's actually, I think, been a real strength of ours in a lot of different ways, having sort of this different way that people do Felipe's. I mean, we always like to say that people walk in and they sort of know how they're going to do it, and they do that. And people get really, aligned with their way of doing Felipe's. And so fast forward, here we are after we've opened a total of 8 locations, had one destroyed by a hurricane in Florida. Kind of the trip around the moon on growth. I think what we've realized through that process is having some really definitive tenets about how you grow and where you're going to grow, and making sure that you're hitting those benchmarks before you even have the growth discussion, because growth can be really distracting. People say, "Oh, rising tide floats all ships," and while that may be true, I think there's a little bit of a trap there, right, if you will. It's not just grow to grow, right? And you've got to be really smart about it. And so we opened our most recent location about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago, in Metairie, Louisiana, which is when we made those tenets about growth, it fit that box. Mm-hmm. And that location's been great and successful, and it's been really good. And so I think that's an affirmation of sort of saying, hey, we have these things that we got to do before we have that growth discussion. And like right now, for example, we've said we're going to operate 6 till 2026. That's our sort of motto that we're working with right now. We have a goal for how much cash has to be in our bank account before we have a discussion about growth. We have it's got to be within a 30-minute basically area of another existing location. And so you start to define those things. And I think that really helps provide a lot more structure to how you grow, when you grow, and the noise that can be created by inbound growth.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so and let's get into the model here, because again, you have a bit of a unique model. But going back to the early days, that first one that opened in New Orleans, I mean, that's at a time when the term fast casual isn't even really a thing.
Evolving,
yeah, and you're building it in a laundromat, and you've brought this concept from Boston. I don't know what the taco scene in New Orleans is really like. I imagine it's better than what it is here in the Midwest, but New Orleans is known for Southern and Cajun.
Yeah.
So tell me about then, when that first one was open, was fast casual taqueria was like a thing that resonated?
I don't think it was a thing that resonated. New Orleans, I find, is always kind of like a little bit behind the rest of the country. So while fast casual is sort of a thing becoming in other parts of the country, New Orleans is still kind of stuck on something else, right? the phase before. Mm-hmm. But I think we did benefit from the notion that this concept started growing within the country about the ability to provide a really quality product in a format that's quick. I think that we've benefited from that trend. And I think that people started to adopt this whole notion that, I can get a fresh, real quality product in a quick service format, but also having the bar was another element that said we're actually doing a full service option there, right? So that kind of lends credibility as well to the quality of the product. And so what we've really morphed and evolved over that time. In fast casual, I think has changed a lot too, right? So we've now created and we're building the systems in the restaurants around this notion that there's multiple revenue centers that are coming into the fast casual realm. In our case, you've got the bar, which is more of a full service option for those who want to sort of take their time and enjoy a cocktail and do that. You've got people who want to come in and out and sort of point and shoot. They want to see what they're looking at and be like, I want that. That looks good. I want a little bit of that. And then we have tons of individuals who are ordering on third-party delivery platforms. Uber Eats is our exclusive partner. And then we've got kiosk as well, where you can just, people come in and they don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to interact with anyone. And everyone also has a kiosk in their pocket, i.e. their phone, and they can dial up their order and come and grab it, and off they go. So it's really become this like multifaceted way in which people are getting the product out of the fast casual environment. And that's really been a big driver of sort of what defines fast casual now, as opposed to, it was interesting because the core model itself, I think was built around this idea that people would come in, grab, and sort of be able to see and visualize what they wanted and build their entree or their product the way they wanted it. And we still have that high level of customization, but now it's on an online platform. And so it's interesting to see how we were kind of poised to be able to take that on. And, that trend really had this gaslighting during COVID. Mm-hmm. We had kind of been on it prior to that because we saw some of this kind of matriculating that way. It's really been an interesting time to be in that fast casual environment because you've definitely had to invest in technology. You've had to realize that your business is changing, and you've had to sort of embrace the notion that people just walking in and doing the thing that you were doing before is really not the way it is today.
Yeah, a little bit of a choose your own adventure style that you guys have going on there. I think fast casual has gotten, privy to this idea that like as the go between QSR and full service,
yep.
You're bringing in best of both worlds, and that includes with the service style and giving people the option of how they want to experience it is value to the guest. Do you feel like that gives that value to that guest?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, we've really tried to embrace that notion that however you want to do Felipe's, we're going to be there for you. So that's been a really sort of theme over the last few years. I would say, but what's top of mind right now in our world is pricing and value, right? I'm sure that's not a new thing for everyone, but I mean, there was a period over the past couple of years where I think we did 4 or 5 price increases like everyone else. Not something we typically want to do. Our focus now has really shifted away from pulling that lever on the pricing side and trying to add incremental value to the proposition that we're offering through hospitality again, right? So bringing hospitality sort of back into the fast casual segment, which I would argue is kind of a low benchmark to begin with, right? I don't think people have a high expectation of hospitality in our environment and our format. But again, being sort of a hybrid model, and again, trying to sort of, inch above that benchmark, that bar, we're really culturally focused right now on saying, look, if you can provide that incremental hospitality, and that's where the value capture is to get repeat guests that are coming back on a more regular basis as opposed to pricing, right? Price, we all know pricing drives demand, pricing drives volume. So if you're saying, okay, well, I want to sort of freeze my pricing where it is, I think the consumer is exhausted of pricing. And now I'm trying to say, well, the pricing is here, but I'm going to give you that little extra juice by just being accommodating and nice and smiling. And, and then people are like, wow, I didn't really expect that. Because I think it kind of got a little jumbled and sort of almost got sucked out of the industry a little bit during COVID, that hospitality element, right? Because everyone's wearing masks, they're behind glass or whatever, and it was like, I'm not getting close, and we're past that, right? And I think being past that implies that, hey, let's not forget the industry we're in at the end of the day, which is making people feel special, right?
Yeah. Well, and it says something too that, you see a lot of the players that are doing well right now, hospitality is part of their differentiator. I mean, people ask me, how is Chick-fil-A so successful? Well, you genuinely get a my pleasure with every single employee. You get a friendly face every single time. And that does have a return on that investment in that hospitality. Getting back to your origin story, though, bringing you into the story here, because again, this was something your father and his neighbor here are putting this business together. At what point did you enter the business, and why did you get brought into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was in the finance world still, and my father-in-law and Felipe's was, I think we had 3 locations, and he was kind of like, they were trying to figure out like, okay, we need to really wrangle this thing and kind of figure out what all of our tenets are and bumper lanes and financially how do we accomplish this growth. Like it isn't just plop one down and off we go. And my father-in-law, I had just gotten married to his daughter, was like, "Hey, you seem like a smart guy. Can you help me figure this out?" And when your family comes knocking and you're like thinking out loud, you're like, "Yeah, I mean, if he needs my help, I'm going to help." And I think that willingness to sort of step in and help has been working with families. We could talk about that forever, but it's also a little bit of a challenge. But at the same time, like there's a connection there. And then I was like, I'm coming in and I'm going to help. And what I really dove in fully and really immersed myself with the industry and the operations and tried to really understand every little element that goes into this thing. And I think what I started to recognize coming from sort of a financial background was that this industry is a math problem, just like most businesses, and we need to figure out how the math problem works. And we need to be able to define that math problem, not just for higher level team members, but for everybody, particularly those operators at the restaurant level. And so, there's a lot of, I'm not a chef. I'm not super into creating new menu items or recipes or whatever. I am really just focused on defining the restaurant business as like this sort of mathematical problem and then that was one element. And then another big one was like culture and really defining our vision and our mission and what it is what's made us successful and not forgetting that on a go forward basis. Like one of the biggest things, my shirt says small batch made from scratch, right? We came up with that. And that's something that I think over the last few years, there's been a lot of pressure to sort of capitulate due to costing, to try to find ways to save money and whatever. And we were conscientiously making a decision like, hey, that's why we're successful is we start at 7 o'clock in the morning every day with raw proteins and fresh produce. And we're making this stuff every day. And we're not going to move away from that. So I guess all this to say was coming in and providing some, structure to how we evaluated the business from a financial perspective, making sure that operations understood how we viewed the business from a financial perspective. And then the second was really gearing up on culture and defining who we are, what we're about, and how that was going to be sort of the platform that launched us going forward.
Yeah. Well, and to think about, the core competency you bring into this, that finance mind that you have, and you can give this business some infrastructure and help to kind of organize this into a more mature brand. I mean, was the thought, well, we can scale this? Because like putting that kind of sophistication into it makes me think that you had that in mind, that we could grow this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was obviously a longer term goal, and it still is to scale it, and we have scaled. But I think that, it was interesting. Like you can start out growth a lot of times, just kind of seat of your pants and then, kind of see where that gets you. And we did that for a small period of time. And then we kind of put some structure to it. And then we kind of grew again. And then I think we've kind of stepped back even a little bit now and sort of said and redefined even more what it is we're about and put some sort of bumper lanes and benchmarks in to really say, let's hit these before we grow. We know where we want to grow, how we want to grow, and when we're going to grow. Mm-hmm. And so we've really put a lot of effort in defining all that. And yeah, scale is important. You have to, there's so many systems that are required for scaling. And I think the one that often gets forgotten a lot that we've put a lot of energy and time into is like the team member, right? Like the technology and the communication of for example, a dishwasher at one of our locations. Do they know how much they're getting paid? And like, this is a real thing. Do they know that we have a 401k plan and that we have profit sharing and that we have two healthcare plans? Do they know even how they make more money? And so we started investing a lot in the ability to sort of diminish the communication gap or barrier between us as a brand and in the end team users. So We put in place like things that automatically sort of remind us of when a team member's hit 90 days, when they've hit 180 days. It reaches out to them directly to start a conversation about, hey, how are things going? Or a ping about, you are now eligible for our 401k plan, which has a 6% match. Even if they don't want to do that, that's okay. We understand. But it's at least, really trying to ramp up the communication with everyone so that, I think a lot of times in our industry, brands and different operators are just not great about talking about what they're themselves, about what they do well, and sort of internally driving that spin wheel of communication. So we put a lot of time into that and focused a lot on that, as opposed to maybe just adding locations and stuff. We really wanted to sort of core up and get everyone dialed in on what it is we're even about.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we were talking about before we hit record, this notion of so many restaurants start with a great recipe. They start with a great product. The chef starts the restaurant, or somebody who's entrepreneurial and has a good product. But, if you start with a good product, like for any business, like you have to have the organization, you have to have that infrastructure in order to succeed as a business. And so It's interesting because it's like, which comes first, like that quality or that business sense? And often it's the business sense that wins out, especially if you're going to grow something. Almost makes me think of like The Bear, the show The Bear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Like, I've been that guy, by the way, with the tickets printing out.
Oh, yeah. The delivery tickets.
Funny story. During COVID, we did a cyber Cinco de Mayo, in quotes, where we basically broadcasted like live entertainment that we normally would have at the restaurant on Cinco, like online. And the whole idea was order your meal ahead of time and come grab it and, have your Cinco at home. And we had created this family meal sort of concept as one of the offerings we were doing, which everyone was sort of kind of dead, doing that because the whole idea was like, feed your family, don't cook. And what we didn't realize was that like the system on our point of sale didn't have a throttle, basically a feature, right? So
couldn't turn it off.
All these people had placed like their order for 5:30 and 6 p.m. and of course now we have this, but it didn't limit how many could get in the queue.
Interesting.
So, I'm sitting there in this machine, this printer is just like, just ticket after ticket after ticket after ticket. And they all would hit at the same time. And even if you couldn't stop it because all those orders were already queued up and they were going to fire no matter what. Right.
Damn.
And we had like this pitchfork line of people out the door that were like, where's my order? And
what'd you do? How'd you get through it?
So what we did, it was kind of a good question, interesting question. And I was like, this is not a great situation, but we're going to figure this out. So I went to the bar and I started a platter of margaritas and went out there with like this platter of margaritas and was like, hey, look, here's the deal. I don't exactly know where your order is or which order it is, but I have a margarita and you can totally have it for free right now while you stand and wait. And I promise you that I'm going to go back in there and try to figure it out. And when I figure it out, I'm going to come back out here and try to tell you. But I'm going to be completely frank. Like, this is a little bit of a disaster and we are sorry, but let's drink some margaritas and just chill for a second and let's try to figure this out. So that's what I did. I went back inside with like 50 tickets and started trying to sort through them. I remember at one point, one of our leadership team members came up to me. He's like, hey, Pike, he's like, I forgot about these. And he reaches in his pocket and pulls out like another 30 that he had just like stacked in his pocket. I'm like, okay, give me those. We're going to put them in order.
Put them in a trash can.
Yeah, right. So we got there. And then it was interesting. So this obviously was a situation that sort of piled on at all locations. And so the next day I got our entire team and then like my wife and everybody. I was like, we need all hands on deck today. And we went through every online order that was placed the day before at every location and called every single guest. We divided and split them up and said, hey, we just want to apologize. Yesterday was not what we expected or what we wanted. And we just wanted to reach out and we understand if you didn't get your order, we're happy to refund you. And we apologize for the malaise. And yeah, it was like 500 people, it was a lot. And so
I
we
mean,
just
that's
divided up the
great
list.
honesty. I mean, you got to be honest with them, right? Because things happen like that. And I'm curious, did you ever look back on that or do any kind of follow up to find out how, or maybe just anecdotally, like how many people were like, forget you, I want my money back, I'm never coming back? And how many people were like, you know what, it happens?
I would say about, yeah, I mean, I would say about 70% of the people we spoke with, 70 to 80 were understanding, especially that we offered the refund. And some people were like, hey, just maybe give me a gift card or something for the future. Most people understood and they appreciated the outreach. And we're doing a lot of that now too, actually, in different ways. Like, I feel like this really big thing right now, that's another sort of undertone in our industry outside of the value proposition driven by getting back to the basics of hospitality, is creating some like endearment connection with your brand, right? And so like we're doing things like we have, all this data now, right? Because people are ordering online. So all this data is coming in and we've got your email and your phone number, and we don't want to bother you a lot, but we do look at things like, you were a pretty good spender with us, but for whatever reason in the last 30 days, you haven't placed an order. Why? So we'll actively or proactively, I say, reach out to these individuals and say, hey, it's me, not you, like the breakup conversation. Did we do something wrong? Like, what did we do wrong? And so a lot of, and sometimes we did do something wrong. We find out what that is and say, hey, well, we'd love to have you come back. Here's, some kind of code or offering off your next order to get you back in. And hopefully we can do better by you this time and get you back on track with being, endeared to our brand. And again, fostering, like we're talking about with a team member, fostering sort of this level of communication with our guests, because we have all this information and this data, so that they're like, this is something that I should pay attention to these guys. I like this place. They're funny. They're sort of self-deprecating about themselves, putting a personality behind that text message or that email where they're like, this isn't a bot, this is a human. It's clearly they're thinking a lot about this stuff. It's kind of funny. They've done the what's in it for me with the offer every time they reach out. And then we do the same with with VIPs who have like a lifetime spend over a certain amount. We look at that information and we say, hey, just want to thank you for being so loyal to us. It means a lot to us. We've noticed. We appreciate it.
Right.
We're all in this vein of sort of taking this information and creating this relationship with the guests that we have because we have the information. So I think that's kind of another big thing that I just feel like where pricing is with everything, that the consumer is just generally speaking way more discerning now than they've ever been about how they're spending their money, where they're spending their money. And everyone kind of has sucked up the idea that it's expensive. So if it's expensive, like what is my differentiator? Where's my value? And where's my added value that I'm bringing to something? And so I think our people are kind of becoming more loyal to those that are providing sort of a different set of value that's not outside of pricing, right? Like not just the cheapest place, not, they're expensive, but, or whatever, right? So it's like, hey, I've made a connection with this group and I'm more discerning now. I like what these people are doing and I'm more discerning about where I'm spending my dollars, and it's not just about price. And so that's kind of where our focus has been.
Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, because the situation you described is not uncommon in the industry, that stuff's gonna go wrong in a restaurant. I mean, honestly, going back to the bear, that's the reason why so many people I talk to in this industry about that show can't watch it, because it brings PTSD.
Yeah, right.
Things that can go wrong. But then your response to that situation is exactly why I think like your approach is spot on, which is the human component, that honesty, saying, hey, we screwed up, we're sorry. People, that's all people want. At the end of the day, they want to see that this is, to your point, not a bot, not a corporate faceless entity. They want to see that somebody cares about their order, cares about their experience. And even if it goes wrong, especially if it goes wrong, they still have that trust. They still have that relationship with the business. And I have to imagine you must think about this because, of course, like myself, I'm thinking about AI all the time now. And we're told by, my company's telling me use AI like anybody. But, AI is that faceless sort of corporate whatever versus what you're doing is human. And so AI can't replace that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that, AI can help you get the information you're looking for, right? Like it can get you that data. Like, hey, can AI help me figure out that Joe XYZ orders a burrito every Wednesday at this time? Yes, they can. But what do I do with that? And how do I respond to that? And I think AI is cool in that way, and it's definitely something that is going to be deployable in a lot of different ways. But like robot calls and robot text messages, I don't think that provides a whole lot of value at this juncture, or maybe ever, to some people. And so I think that to your point, that's a differentiator. I mean, I would go kind of the other way on it, that I'm trying to sort of leave that human element into it so that people don't feel like we're just the bot, because the bot is growing. And I don't know if everyone loves the bot,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think more and more we'll actually see more restaurant concepts start up or grow with the bot as sort of like thinking, hey, people will just want fast and efficient and convenient, and a computer can do that for them faster than a human can. But humanity will continue to prove to be a differentiator. Again, if you look at Chick-fil-A, there's a reason why they do so well. Okay, so taking that back to then your growth, because the South has no shortage of taco concepts, right? I mean, there's so many good tacos. Again, I lived in the South for a long, long time and had a lot of great taco options. I'm in the Midwest now. It makes me very sad. There's a couple, but not as many as someday. Someday it's getting here. But like, you guys are growing now. You're growing into Florida. You've grown in Louisiana. So getting back to this idea of a differentiator, like why do people come to Felipe's and not their other, homegrown taco concept or the other one that moved into town? How can you successfully grow and kind of get your hooks into the communities you're growing into?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And that's another thing. So our mission at Felipe's is to throw our neighborhood a party every day. And we specifically use the word neighborhood because we do try to ingrain ourselves in the neighborhood. And then our vision is to be loved by our team and guests. Really simple stuff, not novel at all. But we kind of have tried to focus on making a connection with the community as well in different avenues and different things that we do. And the whole idea is, we're not the 100-pound gorilla, and I don't know if we'll ever be. And I don't think that we want to compete in that realm, sort of. I think that we're different in a couple different ways. We're really trying to exceed expectations, low expectations on the hospitality front. We have multiple different ways to get our product that we embrace and that we are all about. It's a hybrid approach to sort of the fast casual world. We're kind of doing a couple different things. Like in some of our Florida locations, even we have the handhelds, and we'll go around and re-up order drinks and grab people's orders. Even though we're not full service, we've embraced that notion that, hey, why not go up to somebody and try to get another margarita from them if that's what they want, so they don't have to get out of their seat, or maybe they want just a Felipe special. And great. So we'll do stuff like that. And then the other element is really just like digging in on the community, right? And making sure that they understand that we're part of that sort of infrastructure, that we are part. And so like we do things in New Orleans a lot, like Son of a Saint is a big program that we're very involved with, which is a group that helps fatherless young men basically get the structure and mentorship they need without a dad in their life. And we've been very involved in hiring some of those individuals to work for us to get a feel for what it's like to have a job. Maybe no one's telling them that they need to get a job ever. And so we kind of outreach and go, hey, work with us and get a feel. And then we also sponsor some of the individuals to help pay for college when they go to college, so that financial burden is much there. We do a ton of stuff with the New Orleans Police Department, where we either feed them meals or kind of go and just hang out with them. Oddly enough, it was interesting. This Cinco de Mayo, which, as I said, is a huge day for us. I think this is kind of a salient example of how we view our responsibility in this whole ecosystem of a community. We've had issues in the French Quarter with crowds and and violence taking place late at night in the French Quarter. I think that's no surprise to everyone that that's something that has kind of been an issue for New Orleans, specifically that area. And so on Cinco de Mayo, which has historically brought a very large crowd out, and in 1 year we did have violence be the end result of an event that we were a part of. We closed our doors this year at 6 p.m. And we worked with some other businesses in the immediate area to do the same. So that we basically were propositioning that, it's not about the money. It's not about that fact that, this is our biggest day of the year. We're willing to cut into that to sort of make a stand and a statement to the community that we don't need it as bad as someone getting shot at the end of the day or someone getting hurt. That was a risk or a gamble or whatever you want to call it. But I think that's a very good example of how we sort of view our role in this thing, is that we're not afraid to sort of step in and plant a flag and say, hey, we're going to do this regardless of sort of the consequences, because we believe that not having someone get hurt at the end of the day is more important. And we're also not trying to obfuscate or not take responsibility for our role in being a part of what happens, right?
Yeah.
And you're a business in a community, and you play a role in how that community interacts with you, what happens in that community, how the community views you, how you view the community. You have to be cognizant of that stuff.
Right. That's great. I mean, some things are obviously more important than making money and being successful as a business, and community is a big part of that. I do want to drill in a little bit on the New Orleans-ness of all of this, because I mean, obviously, one of our nation's great iconic cities, one of the most culturally rich cities as well. But, it's interesting because I think from a chain perspective, not a lot comes out of New Orleans, right? You got Popeyes, Smoothie King. But like you have a lot that just kind of stays there. And, New Orleans shares it all by having all of us come there and enjoy it, right? Which is great. But I'm just curious from your perspective, like what does New Orleans give your business? Because you're a taco concept. You're not Cajun, you're not French. And I'm just curious what the roots of it in New Orleans and how that affects the business.
Yeah, I think that I think what New Orleans does really well is they recognize quality and hospitality in a way that maybe the rest of the world, or I mean, not the rest of the world, the rest of the country doesn't. And by what I mean by that is like they embrace it as part of the culture and lifestyle of how they live their lives, right? It's not uncommon for New Orleanians to go out to eat more than 2 or 3 times a week, right? It's like part of the ingrained and part of the way we operate down here. And so it's been great to be a New Orleans concept that has sort of been able to benefit from the fact that individuals here are very supportive of not just a local brand, you want to call it, but also like going out and spending disposable income on restaurants. And so it's interesting, yes, we are a city very highly dependent on tourism, and a lot of visitors annually come to New Orleans to see sort of this bucket list place, which is a huge part of our success as a city. But at the end of the day, we are successful here in New Orleans because of the local individuals that decide to go eat out on a regular basis. And having that as part of sort of the DNA of this community, I think has made us very successful. And it's sort of given us, it's also, there's a lot of concepts being thrown around here a lot. There's a lot of competitors. There's a lot of, and we've stood the test of time, I think, because we've sort of just tried to stay firm to what it is we are and who we are. And we couldn't have done that thus far and won't do that in the future unless we have sort of that local community who's willing to go out and spend money at the local restaurants and support us. New Orleans in the immediate metro area, we're only talking 300,000 to 400,000 individuals, right? Not a huge population, but they go out to eat and they buy stuff and they buy drinks and they buy food. And so it's been great to get sort of held up by the local community here, and we thank them for that.
Does New Orleans show up on the menu at all? Do you guys have any, a flavor of New Orleans on the menu?
We don't really have a ton of flavors of New Orleans on the menu, and I think that's by design, because there is a lot of New Orleans flavor. I think, one thing that's really interesting about, us in New Orleans is the bar. And so a huge part of our business is to go drinks, right? Which is a huge part of New Orleans' DNA, right? So we have designed a styrofoam cup that has like our different, and we make them all, we do different designs on a regular basis, because we know that individual is literally taking that cup and going other places with it. And so like, we had this drink here called the Swirl, which is a frozen margarita with a sangria floater. Individuals in New Orleans came up with that name. And, we'll sell 50 to 100 swirls at each location every day. Just people walking up, can I get a swirl? And just, see you later. And so, I mean, it's interesting to think about how having that element, the to-go drink, and sort of its popularity here, which you could argue, the sort of tenets of to go alcohol, but it's been great. It's been great for us, and we've appreciated it, and it's definitely been a huge part of our business, is just these individuals walking up and saying, "I'll get a swirl, give me a double rocks to go."
Yeah. Well, to get into that a little bit, because, obviously that's not legal in a lot of places, to go drinks, but also very awesome. But, beverage right now is the hottest corner of the restaurant industry. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, it's a high profit margin part of the menu, and there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. So what you've just described to me, though, is like my brain immediately jumped to what's happening in the dirty soda realm, which is you take a standard beverage and you play with it and you innovate it, and it's different and interesting, and people want that. In your case, that's an alcoholic beverage. In some instances, it's non-alcoholic. But you told me before we hit record that you got, 30-40% of your sales are the bar. I mean, a lot of people, I think right now, a lot of restaurants are thinking long and hard about how beverage can be a leg up for them, in this day and age where traffic is stagnant, sales are mostly stagnant as well, unless you're raising prices. What's your advice then for, like, you guys have something here with beverage, even if it's alcoholic? What's your advice for how people should approach beverage to be able to give their concept something a little bit more interesting, something to give a little bit more excitement, I guess?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, if you kind of go over the past maybe 5 years, people got really fancy with drinks. And I think there's sort of like this like, it's like a huge lift or a big hurdle to sort of play in that world, but it's not really, right? At the end of the day, like, creating a cool looking cocktail can be as simple as adding a puree to it, right? And that's really not a heavy lift. So, I mean, I think that my advice to other individuals like we did, which is like, let's not get too far out of our lane, but let's still be a little bit innovative. So we started adding flavors to frozen margaritas: mango, puree, strawberry, watermelon. We do a big watermelon push in the summer where we puree a lot of this ourselves. Again, following sort of along the trajectory of small batch made from scratch. And then all of a sudden, like, you've got this little leg up, on a drink that seems stagnant or whatever. And so I think that it's important to realize it's not this massive heavy lift of trying to be too creative, and just try to stay within the lane and just add a little something, right? And that's what we've tried to do. Is just kind of take what we have and add some things to it to make it a little bit better, and really promote stuff that people like the swirl, right? So we've added the swirl full time to our menu. Mm-hmm. And kind of an ode to all the guests over the years who kind of came up with that, and doing things like that, I think, keep you relevant and keep you sort of in the mix.
Sure. Yeah. All right, Pike, last question for you. What does the next couple of years look like? You said keep it 6 till 26.
Yeah.
And what's after that? What is Felipe's capable of?
Yeah. So I think the next few years, so right now, like I said, the cultural focus has been on the hospitality element. The focus on the guest side has been, endearment and creation of a relationship sort of that's ongoing with our guests based upon the habits that the data that we get and the habits that we see based on that data, and in the loyalty that's created based upon creating that relationship. And then from the standpoint of growth, it's build the cash to a level that we made sure we wanted to hit, and operate those 6 till 26. Don't get too distracted. And I think at that point, we're going to evaluate, what it is we want to do next. And I think that's adding additional locations. And at that point, also we've got, to go to the family element aspect of this, right? Generationally, we're getting to a point where me and some of our other family members are kind of running the business, and they're getting older. And so how do we think about generational stuff with the current ownership and changing that, or buyouts? And so we're kind of working through all of that to sort of set us up for what I believe will be our next phase of growth. And doing that growth in a little bit different way than we had done in the past in terms of where we plant the flag, right? So we're much more, I think, savvy, I guess is the word now, about where we want to grow and where we want to be. And, it's not novel in our ideas, but it's like, hey, you planted a flag here, go 30 minutes down the road, plant another flag there, and grow your basically scale on the basis of capitalizing on the additional infrastructure you already have in place, which I think is a value that's difficult to determine at any one given time, but it has immense value. You don't realize the value that you've created by having a brand existing in a market where there's influence. And I also don't think you realize all the time the value that's created by having people and human capital infrastructure already in place in an area that can be stretched. So I think that's what's next is to get to the end of next year, being in a healthy financial and capital situation, having the tenets that we wanted to hit in place, and then having a discussion with how we sort of go to the next phase and the next generation of Felipe's as a concept.
Well, it's very exciting, and good luck to you, Pike
Thanks.
Howard, the co-owner of Felipe's Taqueria. Thanks so much, Pike. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sam.
That was my interview with Felipe's Taqueria co-owner Pike Howard. So what should you learn from this interview? Here are my 6 takeaways. My first takeaway is that sometimes you need to let guests choose their own adventure in your restaurant. So Felipe's has this hybrid service model where you can go in and experience full service at the bar, or you can go to the counter and order yourself. And Pike explained that this is a real differentiating factor for Felipe's because people feel like they have their own way of experiencing the brand. There's not one way to do it, and the way that people do it tends to be the way Pike said that they do it every time they come in to Felipe's. I think that's a fun way to have a business, right? Which is, you don't want it to be too confusing. You don't want it to be too complex for the guest, because that'll actually drive them away. But if you let them experience the restaurant at their own pace, at their own, with their own service model that they want in that moment, then that empowers the guest to really create their own experience, choose their own adventure. Think about ways you can do this with your own business. If you're not a traditional full service, traditional QSR, fast casual, but you can blend all of these service structures now, which today is easier than ever before, with technology empowering that, and also with guests just expecting something different. Guests today understand that you don't have just traditional fast food or just traditional full service, that there is a blend of service that exists at restaurants. Find the blend that makes sense for your restaurant and have some fun with it so guests can, again, choose their own adventure. My second takeaway is that growth can be a distraction. So set clear growth goals and stick to them. Felipe's has been in business for now almost 20 years. And Pike was explaining that, they have the opportunity to open more units quickly and, expand across the South if they want to. But they have prioritized instead the internal growth, building systems, building infrastructure, taking care of guests, identifying what is this concept? What do we hope to accomplish? What is our role in the community? And how do we stick to that? And I think that's really admirable because, over 20 years growing to 6 units, most would say, well, that's really slow growth. Are things okay? Well, yeah, things are okay, but they're keeping that growth, again, within each of the restaurants and making sure they're as healthy as can be. Pike has said, they have these tenets of growth that they have set. They set them out early, and they've just really stuck to their guns on those because they believe so much in having a clear identity for the brand. I love how he explained that, growth is a distraction. And it's true. When you get into this business, If you have a successful restaurant company, you're going to have a lot of people telling you, hey, you should open it here, you should open it there, you should franchise, you should do this. And it's really easy to think, hey, maybe I have this huge success on my hands and we can be a major chain someday. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you also have to have a very clear understanding of whether or not that's what you want out of your business, whether or not the journey to get there is what you want. And, if you have that right business, that right model that's ready for that extreme growth. I've said this a lot. I'll say it again. I've covered this industry for 16 years and I've seen a lot of brands fail because they tried to grow too quickly. Pike is doing things the opposite way, where it is, let's invest as much as we can into each of these restaurants to have them be the best that they possibly can be, and the growth will come. Don't get distracted by that growth. My third takeaway is that restaurants are a math problem and operators need to know that math. So again, Pike, finance guy. He got an economics degree out of the University of Virginia. He went and spent time at Merrill Lynch in New York before he came into this business. So he has this economic financial mindset, which has really benefited Felipe's, as we've talked about. And I like how the way Pike explained it was, the restaurant to him, he saw it as this math problem that he needed to solve, and solving it led to, again, kind of building out this successful restaurant, having this infrastructure and these systems in place. But the point that I want to make clear here that Pike added that I think is so important, which is that, the restaurant operators need to understand that math problem. And by the way, if we take a step back, you've, I'm sure, heard this before, because you can break a restaurant down by this math problem very easily. If you say, okay, we need to accomplish, this much sales to break even. We have this many seats in our restaurants. We need to do this amount of volume to hit that number. You can run those numbers and really figure out how much sales you have to really drive on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis if you wanted to. But the point Pike made is that the operators, the people in the restaurant, the boots on the ground, those people have to also understand that math, because they're the ones running this restaurant. They have to understand really the nitty gritty of what it's going to take to make this restaurant successful if you hope to make that concept a success. My fourth takeaway is that you have to be honest with your customers when things go bad. The story about what went wrong on Cinco de Mayo that Pike shared, I thought was probably something that gave a lot of you PTSD, and probably a lot of you can really relate to, which is this idea that they couldn't turn off their digital ordering on Cinco de Mayo, and they were running a special, and the tickets kept flooding in. And again, that nightmare scenario that was portrayed on The Bear, as we talked about, and that lots of businesses, I'm sure, have experienced. But what's important about the story isn't necessarily what went wrong, but how they fixed it, which is that Pike went out and started just serving free margaritas to everybody in line waiting for their food. They reached out to the customers, in the following days to say, hey, we screwed up and this is what we're going to do to make it right. The point is that things are going to go bad. You're going to have bad experiences with your guests. Sometimes things out of your control are going to happen, and your restaurant is going to look bad to those customers. But you just have to be honest with them. Just tell them what went wrong and how you're going to fix it. They just want it to be fixed. They want to know, am I getting my money back? Am I getting a gift card? What's going to happen? And if you just very honestly and authentically explain to them what's happened and how you're going to make it right, you've saved that relationship, chances are. So that is hospitality. That is really taking care of your guest, and just expect that things will go wrong and have a plan in place for making things right, because you don't want to lose that relationship in the long run. My fifth takeaway is that the data you collect is a relationship building tool. Going back to Pike's experience as the finance guy, the guy who can look into data and numbers and kind of create this math problem out of it, it's so interesting to hear him talk about hospitality, but on one side, but also data on the other side. Because if you think about data, it's a lot of numbers and figures, and you might see it as just kind of very, not very nuanced. It's all there in black and white, right? Whereas hospitality, there's a lot of nuance to it. It's about relationship building. It's about personality. It's about, how you're treating your guest. But the way Pike explained, turning this data into hospitality, I think is a really interesting point worth taking, which is that when you look into your data, you can see your consumer behavior. You can understand the frequency with which they visit. You can understand if they haven't come back in weeks or months. You can understand their behavior in a way that helps you talk to them, communicate to them, go back to them and say, hey, haven't seen you here in a few months. Did we do something wrong, or what can we do to get you to come back? The point is that you have to look at it as this opportunity to build trust, to build a relationship, not purely hey, you've come in 5 times, now here's a free thing for you. And I really like that idea because hospitality, as Pike explained throughout this interview, is a real differentiating factor in the industry. The fast casual category, as he explained, the way it's evolved, hospitality has become a very important thing that everybody really has to focus on in this business. And in order to get hospitality right, data can be a tool. It can be an asset. You don't have to just look at data and distill your business down to the black and white without nuance. And you're going to give the free thing after so many visits. Look at it as an opportunity to build trust, build a relationship, and drive hospitality. My sixth and final takeaway is that innovating with your beverage program is not a very heavy lift. Look, beverage is huge right now. We all see this happening. You see it in non-alcoholic beverage, especially with dirty sodas, boba teas, everything that's going on with the drive-through coffee category. Customers are very invested in beverage innovation today because it's giving them a sense of adventure, a sense of change and fun at a time when, I think they really need that in their lives. And Pike has, explained here how Felipe's has a full bar program, and that's become a differentiator for the concept because a lot of fast casuals don't have that full bar program. But he was explaining like it's not a very hard thing to go from having a standard beverage platform to having one people are excited about. He explained it's as easy as just adding a couple ingredients, adding a puree to a beverage and calling it, some fancy name. Whatever it is, look at your beverage program, figure out how you can find some simple ingredients, some simple changes to add to it, come up with some branded, some fun names and some fun branding for it, and put it out there for your guests. Right now, that's what the guest wants. They really want to see you investing in beverage because that's what the whole industry is really kind of going toward. But it doesn't have to be this big, scary, super expensive thing that you do to your menu. You can do some easy things to it, as Pike explained at the end of our interview, and I think it'll be well worth it. Those are all my takeaways for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email me at sam.oches@informa.com. Thanks again and talk to you next week.